Hello, everybody, and a very warm welcome to today's webinar. Now, we had a short break since the last webinar, I think, and we're now ready to get started again. And I'm really happy to be, hosting Luca this time. Luca here is Associate Product Manager at Translated and Matecat as well, I'm sorry. And we're going to talk today about machine translation and post-editing in the language industry. Now, before we start, since we're still waiting for a few people, if you have any problems, for example, in hearing us, please let us know immediately so that we can fix any technical issue before starting, okay? So we have also launched the poll, and I see that there are a lot of freelance translators today, and this is very, very interesting, and it's very good as well, because Luca has very interesting insights for all of you, all the freelance translators that actually work with translation agencies, and he's going to give us a little bit of an insight on how post-editing is actually considered in the translation industry and how machine translation is also evolving in this industry. So I don't see anybody mentioning any problems in hearing us. So I guess that we can just get started. So.
I think actually there's somebody.
Everybody is saying that the sound is good, except for one person. So what we're going to do is we're going to try to just speak closer to the microphone, and hopefully this is going to help. As I was saying, I'm here with Luca.
Well, thank you very much for the introduction, Claudia, and thank you very much, everybody, for attending this webinar. Now, I know that this topic is a little controversial, so let's try to make it a little entertaining and as insightful as possible.
Yes. Since tell us, however, what we're going to talk about. Just can you give us like a preview?
Of course.
I have this slide here that I see, so maybe we can go through the points here.
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing that we're going to examine is, in general, how the machine translation and post-editing is used in the industry, because, of course, lately there have been a lot of developments, and there's always this kind of mixed feelings about the machine translation. So let's see how it is considered and how it is used throughout the industry.
Okay.
Then we'll also discuss about some pros and cons. There's a lot of freelance translators, so you may wonder, but is machine translation a liability, or is it actually an asset? So let's try and see a few different.
That's very, very interesting. I'm very interested in that as well.
Yeah, and then again, also, we're going to examine the impact of post-editing on the services that you provide, and how translation agencies also use it. And well, we're going to see how the mechanics of this works. And then we'll take a look at some practices and KPIs that, of course, you need to monitor if you want to keep the pace and exploit as much as possible this new opportunities that technology is offering us. And then we'll have a short Q&A session. So if you have any questions in the meantime, of course, hold on to it and feel free to type it in. And we'll try to reply to as many questions as possible.
Yes, well, feel free also to type the questions in while Luca is talking. It's not a problem. I have all the questions under control, and hopefully we will have time for all of them. So just type in the questions, and we'll get back to the questions at the end of the presentation. So Luca, let's get started. What is post-editing, and how MTM post-editing is used in the industry?
Yeah, so post-editing, we intend for post-editing the editing, yeah, of course, you might say, of machine translation. So the machine translation produces an output, and then the translators edit it.
Mm-hmm.
So what is so controversial about this topic? Because you go on forums and there's always this saying, oh, but this sounds like Google Translate. This is, I don't know, this is basically not good enough. It's not a good output. It's not good translation. So the post-editing is always considered kind of the dirty little secret of the industry. Now, it is a controversial topic, but it's actually funny to consider it controversial because there's been so much discussion about it. And as you may know, if you are up to date with the latest news, you know that basically there's a lot of talk going on about neuro machine translation. Now machine translation is the rampage basically of the industry. So machine translation and post-editing, the truth, and I'm going to say this plainly, the truth is that as much as translators are, let's say, dubious about, they have dubious opinions about its quality and its value, the truth of the matter is they've actually been the very first people to use it. Now, I can also speak for myself because I've started as a translator. I was doing my translation studies, And especially when I was translating from Italian into Arabic, I wouldn't know how to write the thing. And the first thing I would do is go to Google Translate, type some input, and just to get an idea of what it actually was, and then I would do my translation. And this is actually a behavior that has been consistently increasing throughout the translation industry. And believe it or not, it's not actually the clients trying to enforce machine translation and post-editing to cut costs, to increase productivity. And it's not LSPs, actually. LSPs are just training along a trend that was actually started by the translators themselves. And why do I know this, except for my experience? If you don't want to take my experience, I can, of course, speak for what we have observed in here at translated.net. Now, if you are familiar with translated.net, you know that we have built a lot of products for the language industry. The most famous ones being Matecat and My Memory. Now, Matecat, as you probably know if you're here attending this webinar, is a CAT tool that is being used by 15,000 translators every day to actually do professional translations. And basically, they receive machine translation and they are able to do post-editing on the work through Matecat. And then the other product is My Memory. That is the largest public translation memory in the world, and it's available in Trados by means of a plugin. And in Matecat is provided, basically, it's perfectly integrated and provided for free. And the thing is, My Memory, besides being a translation memory, so a public translation memory repository, it also provides machine translation by means of Google Neural Machine Translation and DeepL. So the combination of these two products allows translators to do post-editing. And by using these two tools, we have observed that, well, we have observed this. See for yourself.
Oh, this is interesting. Let's have a look.
Yeah, basically, this is a real message that was captured from one of the moments when there was a downtime for My Memory. So there was no pre-translation proposed, and we have been like overloaded with this kind of requests. So as you can see, no pre-translation. I have an impossible deadline to respect, and I cannot do it without machine translation. So
actually, translators are considering machine translation as a benefit to deliver more words and actually accelerate turnaround times.
Yeah, exactly. That's correct.
And it's perceived as this, right?
Yeah, precisely so. Even though you go on forums and you seem to perceive the opposite of what Claudia just said, in truth, when we see this kind of issues happening, this is basically exactly the demonstration. It's proof that machine translation and post-editing is perceived as an asset during your actual work. And why is that? Post-editing, of course, provides already an initial suggestion to for a match that you're translating, and allows you to decide, is this good enough, or does it need to do, or does it need some editing? But the truth of the matter is, you would hardly need to type from scratch all the sentence. Most of the times, you will have already some of the work done for you. So this, of course, translates in higher productivity for you. It allows you to go faster. So let's go back a little, and let's talk about the industry. So post-editing has been gaining ground over the past few years. Throughout the world, and this is a survey that was conducted by Common Sense Advisory in 2016. So now we're talking about 2 years ago, and basically all the participants in the survey were asked if they were providing post-editing service of some kind. The participants were both, of course, freelancers and LSPs alike. Now, as you can see, now the replies have been categorized by continent, and you can see here that Asia and Latin America have been among the largest providers of machine translation, having basically 70% of the participants providing post-editing service, or at least declaring to do so. North America then would follow along with about around 50% here of respondents that declare to provide machine translation service, and Europe, that is perhaps the fulcrum of the machine translation development, basically trails along with 45% of respondents declaring to provide machine translation services. And what about Italy? 2 years ago, this figure was at about 60%. So 60% of the respondents stated that they provide machine translation services. And of course, the machine post-editing started to be perceived as a need, and the innovation of proposing post-editing in industry started from the software industry. So especially in the 80s, with the game localization becoming a necessity and a business opportunity for firms, they started, of course, to experiment and integrate post-editing into their processes. So as you can see here from this chart, you would see that basically technical and the type of the fields that require mostly technical content, so not very creative. So for example, the software industry, manufacturing, heavy machinery, that these business sectors that require a lot of user manual content, and then legal, of course, pharmaceutical, they all, of course, make abundant use of machine post-editing. But as you can see from the bottom here, there are some, this also back in 2016, there were some sectors that you maybe wouldn't expect. For example, travel and tourism. I mean, tourism is a sector that requires a lot of creativity, does it not?
Yes, of course. But also marketing, I see, advertising and marketing.
Correct.
I would never expect to use like machine translation post-editing for that type of content. And
surprisingly more than other sectors like tourism, which is, I mean, should be a little bit easier and less creative than marketing. And well, this also, none of these figures have probably changed, because you might have heard that Facebook, TripAdvisor, Amazon, they're investing a lot in machine translation.
Exactly, technology. That's true, that's true.
So these figures by now have probably doubled, at the very least. And so even though the technology still generates controversy, and there's much rumor about it, it's abundantly clear that basically most and more firms are perceiving it as an asset. But how much is this worth in economical terms? Now, this chart is still a study that refers to last year, basically, and it is a study, a projection of basically how much the translation market is worth. So you can see from these figures that translation is the biggest chunk of the market in 2017. So more than 60% of the translation industry, the biggest, the richest chunk of it, over $24 billion is constituted by translation services. Then, of course, you can see transcreation and machine translation post-editing trail along with very small niches. But what's the catch here? Because we've said before that a lot of firms, a lot of businesses and sectors are starting to use and double the production with machine translation post-editing. How does it fit with this chart that you see here? Now, the answer is, to me, very simple. Machine translation post-editing, even though it may not be declared in the open, is used either as a service on its own. So, for example, a client requires not so much to have a high quality output, but requires a service to basically understand the content of a specific text. They will require something like machine translation post-editing, which, for example, also Translated provides light post-editing. So the output of the machine translation is slightly edited to fix the most obvious mistakes. And then basically the output is sold to the client. This is a very small niche, but then again, translation also makes use of post-editing to increase the productivity. I mean, such a high figure in terms of money can only be possible if translation was produced at a regular pace, fast, and of course, productivity must be high for this. And these kind of figures will not be possible without the help of machine translation and machine translation post-editing. Now, what the fundamental difference here is how much addition is made to the machine translation.
So you're saying that basically all professional translation agencies or a professional translation service may have at the base machine translation to help translators go faster and produce more?
Precisely so. Okay. Precisely so, or at least the very huge majority of them.
Okay.
Because otherwise this will not be possible. Now, this kind of machine translation services might be provided by large translation firms. For example, they have machine translation engines trained on their data, and they would provide them to their users to retain that user base. But then again, also smaller translation companies, for example, even like Translators, they would start to develop more interesting and innovative technologies based on machine translation, to increase their productivity, double their output, and also help translators to produce better quality. Now, I know that this statement still may sound controversial to some of you, but we'll see later in a few minutes, in a few moments, how this is actually true.
But it's actually starting to make sense, I think. Good.
So, talking about big and small guys. So yeah, this basically summarizes what I was describing before. So of course, large companies can afford to build custom machine translation engines and provide them to the users, but also the smaller companies would start to build increasingly more interesting technologies to create competition around the market and develop new interesting and creative solutions to help translators increase their productivity and also, of course, cut the costs of translation services for clients, but also to make translators' life easier. So to describe better these kind of technologies, now I will need to first introduce how we used to actually do post editing back in what was it, 2008 or so?
Yes, it was a long time ago, and I actually remember this process, and it was almost a nightmare.
Yeah, actually, I wasn't there, but I was told so, and I had the shivers when I heard it. I mean, basically,
yes. I remember.
Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes, tell me.
I'll try to summarize it here. So what we had to do to actually offer clients machine translation post editing was we got the document. We would have to generate a monolingual TMX. We would need to populate this TMX with MT from, for example, Google Translate. And then we would generate a bilingual TM with MT suggestions.
Yes.
And then upload it on a CAT tool. So basically, 5 steps or something?
Yes, it was really a nightmare. I mean, it was a long process.
Yeah, so as you can see, it was more of a hindrance back in the day. So, but nowadays, what we do is simply, we get the document and then we feed it to a CAT tool. And you are able to do post editing right on the fly because the CAT tool would provide machine translation directly to the translator. And there are several providers now that have started to develop, smaller companies that have started to provide this kind of innovative solution. So Matecat is, of course, one such solution, the one that, for obvious reasons, we know best. Then, of course, XDMs, Market, MMs, or other technologies, other CAT tools that include a machine translation plan in their business offering. But for now, let's talk about Matecat because, of course, it summarizes basically the point that I'm trying to make on how it can be beneficial to both clients, but of course also the translators. So
let's have a look.
What does Matecat do? Now, this is something that maybe not everybody knows. So you think about Matecat, and if you have been around fairs or if you look at the website, you only see the big cat. So you may think that Matecat is actually a cat joke. But in truth, the truth of the matter is that Matecat stands for Machine Translation Enhanced CAT Tool. So Matecat was built as a research project initially, co-funded by the European Union, among other partners, to study machine translation, post-editing, and how it can be beneficial for the language industry. So what did we do? We, by default, Matecat is integrated with My Memory, as I said at the beginning, and it provides Google Neural Machine Translation now, DeepL Machine Translation, and also Microsoft Machine Translation. But we've also developed some connectors to integrate the most popular machine translation engines on the market. So you may be an Persian user, or you may be a Slavic language translator, and you have an account on Yandex. You can, of course, use your account to integrate your machine translation engine in Matecat directly. So you would use Matecat as any other CAT tool, and you would receive suggestions from your favorite machine translation engine. And what does Matecat offer to translators and clients alike to actually measure what you're doing? Because the crucial thing about post-editing, let's stop here maybe for a moment. The crucial thing about post-editing, you are receiving machine translation suggestions. There is the rightful question to pose. So is the final quality going to be good enough? And costs are decreasing, so how can I actually set my rates based on that? So these are all excellent questions, and of course you need data You need to have all the information right in front of you, and you need to share them with your client in order to find the a good compromise and a good business negotiation with them. So what does Matecat do? Matecat provides all the information about what we call the post-editing effort. Post-editing effort is how much you needed to edit the suggestion that you received from either the translation memory or the machine translation. So let's see this page. This is an extract from the editing blog in Matecat. Now, you can see, of course, that there is a segment that contains 10 words. As you can see the total time that it took you to edit that segment, in this case 28 seconds. Here you can see the suggestion that you received. In this case, it's a 100% match from the translation memory. So this is the average seconds per word that it took you to edit, and this number that you can see, this percentage number, is the post-editing effort. So you can see here that the final translation, here you can see basically the track change view. You can see that it was edited, and basically was edited by 12% of the sentence. So this 12% represent the distance between the final output and the suggestion that you receive. Now, bear this number in mind because this is going to be interesting in a few in a few slides from now. So what does this mean basically? So when you have all this information in mind, you can calculate on average how much you will need to edit your translation, and also you can calculate the time that it takes you. So basically, you can make decisions based on the total time it takes you to modify a translation and the effort that you actually need to make to edit it, to establish your rate and basically to communicate with your clients better. And also the client can have an understanding, a better insight on how much does machine translation need to be edited, or the translation memories for that matter, for a given language pair. And with Matecat, we believe that transparency, actually providing people with all the data they need to make decisions, will allow them to do better negotiations and basically have a clearer overview of how much they're earning and how much can they earn by using all this this technology. So I've said, bear this figure in mind. Now, the thing is, now let's talk a bit about human translation. Now, this is a survey that was conducted by Slater. Now, I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but it's basically a new set that is available for the language service, the language industry, and provides a lot of useful information about reports on technology, news about the latest trend in the industry, and it's very, very interesting. I totally recommend checking it out if possible. Now, this survey basically asked people what will be the average human translation speed per hour by 2022. So, and it's interesting to see that there were a lot of mixed opinions. So the highest of them being that 27% of the respondents said that by 2022, we will be able to have 400 to 700 words translated per hour. Around 20% said that we will be able to do more than 1,300 words per hour. And then you can find other replies in between. So there were a lot of people convinced that we would be able to do only below 400 words. And a very small percentage of people convinced that we will be able to do, 12% of people actually, convinced that we will be able to do in between 1,000 and 1,300 words per hour. Now, the funny thing is that the future is already here, in a sense.
Yes, it is.
Because by seeing in Matecat, now this is a translation that was done on a text that I have to admit it was not especially difficult, but then again, the machine translation output was still pretty good. And well, you can see here, this was basically practically almost what the full machine translation confirmation. And you can see, if you know Italian, that is pretty good. And the thing is, Matecat provides you this kind of information here right below. Sorry, I'm not sure I have this thing.
Here it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, but no, coming back. Okay, anyway, you can see here the close-up. Now, you can see that Matecat provides you with information about your total speed per hour. Now, why is this important? Now, of course, you know that nowadays, of course, rates vary among markets, depends on the subject, on the client, on the market. So there's a lot of different factors. But let's say that on average, the translation rate is on average 0.05. So to make basically 35 euro per hour, you will need basically to translate or exceed 700 words per hour. And as you can see here, your speed, the speed for translating this text was actually already 1270 words per hour. So which is incredibly high, and we don't need to wait 2022 to get there. So as you can see, and this would not be possible without receiving machine translation and without doing post-editing on machine translation. So this is why it's a bit funny to when basically we consider this topic controversial, because there's obvious benefits for doing that. Now, if you see that you are more productive, of course, that you can go faster per hour by using machine translation. Of course, the most obvious benefit is that you can take in more clients, because of course you can do more text in the same time span that it would maybe 2 years ago it would have taken you to do just one text. Mm-hmm. And then again, perhaps, yes, it would cut the cost because maybe you would receive a discount on machine translation, but then again, you would be able to process more words per hour with basically less effort. So this means that basically you would actually get more money in the end. It's as think of it as offering a discount on larger volumes, perhaps. It's basically the same principle. And basically, to go back on general the post-editing efforts, now this is not also only beneficial for productivity, so just for the number of words that you can actually translate per hour, but also for quality. And why is that? As you can see from this chart, basically, this is what we've measured, and this is actually a trend. So, of course, the actual figures are a bit more variable, but this is the general trend that we have observed starting from 2010. Now, you can see that the post-editing effort back in 2010 was about 40% and above. This means that, of course, all the suggestions that you would receive, you would have to basically erase half of them and replace them. Now,
it was almost useless at that time, right?
That's correct, mm-hmm. Because of course the technology was much less developed. Mm-hmm. But as the technology developed, now let's see here already in 2013, we can see that the post-editing effort decreased up to 37% about, and then this is more or less where we are now. It decreased by almost 20%. On average, and this of course does not take into account all the language combinations. This is just the average. So imagine that in about 5 years, from going to change on average half of the translation, now we're going to change about a quarter of the mm-hmm. translation. So as you can see, this means that the translation, the machine translation, is producing increasingly better output. And what does it mean? It allows you to do less effort into modifying it, because of course, if the machine translation is already good enough, you would only have to spend less time on the segment, so you can go faster and you still produce the quality you desire to, you wish to deliver to your client. So this is true for machine translation in general, but now there is a game changer that, of course, you probably have heard about. Now, oh, yes. the rage nowadays is neural machine translation. Now, this technology was, started to be implemented in 2016, but we started to integrate it in Matecat in 2017, in April. This is the moment when we started to integrate it. And let's take a look at what happened. Now, for example, the most emblematic case here is English into Italian. Now is this green line over here. Now, this green line over here tells you that from the moment that neural machine translation was activated, post-editing effort decreased from 35% to 27, something like that, and this just in a month time span. Now a year has passed, and I wish I had with me a chart with more updated data, but as you can see, it's pretty impressive for just a month to decrease post-editing effort this much. Now, these charts are a little bit more elaborate, so this take into account the data for different language combinations up until April 2017. So, and as you can see, besides a few exceptions, for example, English into Spanish, now this, in this case, the with neural machine translation is spiked up only to go down again in 1 month later. But as you can see, in general, for all language pairs, there was a dramatic decrease of post-editing effort, meaning that the machine translation was actually producing very good output. Now, I ask you to remember the figure about post-editing effort for our 100% translation match being 12%. Now, why did I ask you to do that? The fact is, if a translator thinks that basically a 100% translation match, so a match that was actually confirmed by a human translation is 11%, 12%, and if at some point the machine translation will manage to will lead the average post-editing effort to be 11%, well, I'm not sure if it's clear, but this means that basically the machine will be able to produce human-like translations. And I know that this sounds a bit scary, but it also can offer a lot of interesting opportunities, and I will see why. Because if the machine translation is able to produce human-like translations, what about translation memories? What about corpora? And this is actually where the big question comes into play. So where would they even fit into this? And in a moment we'll provide the answer to that, or at least our view on the subject. So before answering that, so we've seen that the neural machine translation is being the game changer of this, and we like to think that there will be further developments, and one is basically already a reality, and this is, for example, Modern MT. Now, Modern MT is a technology that also Translators has developed, and it's adaptive neural machine translation. What does it mean? It basically provides neural machine translation, but it adapts to translation memories and human translated content. So it means basically that it learns to behave and translate as a human in a way.
Are you saying basically that, for example, when a translator uses modern machine translation, so modern MT, and starts translating the text, if the translator does any type of correction, this modern MT is going to learn from these corrections and it's going to be even better next time?
That's precisely so. That's precisely it, Claudia. The fact is that neural machine translation already by itself is a process that basically emulates neural networks and uses deep learning AI technology, so artificial intelligence, to learn progressively how to behave, which output to produce, and by trial and error, by training, it gets better at an incredible speed. So yes. And Modern MT is actually the next step of this, and I think we were going to see many more technologies like this in the future.
Yes, I think so.
Modern MT is the start, but I like to think that we're going to see many more interesting developments in this direction. So when you feed Modern MT with human translations with your terminology, basically it will learn to translate like you do. And the next time it will produce a suggestion that very much resembles what you would have produced on your own.
Okay, so it's able to adapt also to your style.
That's correct. That's correct, because basically it reads how you translate segments and it tries to emulate that over time. And so I like to think this is basically the direction in which we're going. So adaptability and constant training of machine translation engines.
Sounds very scary, though.
Yeah, it is. It is. And this basically leads us to the big question. So where do we fit into that? So machine translations, machine is getting better. Post-editing is basically allowing us to triplicate our productivity and to go faster. So where do we fit? So game over. Thank you for playing. Bye-bye, students who are trying to make a living with translations and studying.
There is actually also questions coming in saying exactly this. If everybody triplifies their productivity and translates 10,000 words per day, translators will be forced to use MT and there will be soon no words left to translate. This is what Andreas is saying right here in the chat right now. What do you think about this?
I think that this is not going to be the case, and luckily so. Because
we're safe.
Yeah, because the thing is, well, technology, like everything, is an opportunity. And let's, for example, think about this kind of use case.
Okay,
now
this is TripAdvisor, isn't it?
This is TripAdvisor now,
Okay.
and this kind of content basically, well, okay, it exceeds 10 billion words, and 10 billion words is basically about 12,000 times the work of Shakespeare. So take all the Shakespeare's opus,
Okay.
and put it together, multiply it by 12,000 times, and you get how much TripAdvisor, how many words TripAdvisor contains.
Okay.
Now the thing is, imagine doing this with old school translation techniques.
Oh, it would be impossible.
It would be impossible, basically.
It would cost so much.
Exactly. So the thing is, machine translation is getting better and is helping you to produce more and with better quality. So where does the human being fit into this process? The process is creativity. Now, machine translation can imitate human, can get better at producing style and everything, but it will hardly ever be as creative as a human. So the thing is, taking away all the mechanical tasks, like, for example, well, typing being the most obvious one, and doing research being the second one. Now, if machine translation is able to produce, to already suggest something that is very good, something that is already decent, what the human can do is create and make it even better for the target audience, and provide the added value by using specific terminology that perhaps the machine translation can get close to, but not exactly guess on the first try. So the thing is, with this, the humans, sorry, not the humans.
Okay.
Yeah. So humans will actually.
Luca always gets excited when he talks about this part. So I don't know why.
Yeah, sorry about that. Just so the thing is, humans will be able to produce more, of course. Maybe the cost will be reduced a little, but by being able to produce more, you will in the end receive basically the more income for yourself, and you will be able to focus on what is important about translation. So creativity. And to answer to Andreas, no, humans will never be left out. I mean, I don't believe they will.
Okay.
I don't believe they will.
Yeah, I think that's a good, an interesting point concerning this actually came out at a conference that I attended I think it was a couple of months ago. It was the ELIA Together conference. And we actually had a panel at the end of the conference and we talked about the future of translators in the translation industry. And I think that this is a concern that is obvious to have, and it's actually common among a lot of professional translators. And I was making an example that I think just got straight to the point, because we are seeing a lot more data being created nowadays since, let's say, even 10 years ago. So we have more and more data that needs to be actually translated. So I think that at some point we will have to do like a sort of division between what can go through machine translation and what actually can be only done by a human. So obviously translators have to, let's say, reinvent themselves in some way. So they have to maybe specialize a little bit more in specific subjects or in specific types of translations. But for example, if I'm a client and I have a website that goes online and I have my homepage, I'm not going to use machine translation for that part, because I know how important it is to have the client get to my website and maybe buy something on my website. But maybe it can be used for parts of the website that nobody actually reads, like terms and conditions or Q&As, something like that. So actually, I think there is going to be a difference between the type of content that is translated with machine translation and the type of content where the human is still absolutely necessary to give what humans actually can do, that added value that humans can give. So
that is good. That is definitely an interesting point, and yes, I totally agree with that. And the fact is that in the market there's always room for different sectors. So, for example, what we call boutique translation agencies. So very a very small language package that they offer and sell, very specialized translation translators, and very specific techniques for doing so. So most of the times very old school. I mean, there's still demand for that. So I think there will be always place for different kinds, different approaches to the job. But as Claudia was saying, yes, content such as this, or user-generated content, there are parts of it that, of course, need very high quality and where only the human can make the difference there. But I mean, if I'm a business and if I have to invest money on revamping my website, I will probably never have this. Let's imagine something like TripAdvisor. I will never have the budget to do so.
Absolutely.
With standard, I mean, old school translation techniques. So I will have to use machine translation in a way, or at least to cut the costs on, for example, post editing.
Yeah. So, and there's also Patricia actually that is saying right now that the volume of information being produced and needing translation is also growing exponentially. So even with machine translations, translators couldn't keep up with the ever growing amount of information that needs translation. So Patricia, this is actually a good point, and this is what we I think think as well. So yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So to conclude, maybe I'll just leave this this light open here for a while. I mean, what we would like to imagine here, translated, but I think also this is the trend where the translation is going. The thing is, machine translation is helping in a way to basically break down language barriers, because even a service such as machine translation post editing, I mean, it allows people to still get access to content that they would not be able to understand otherwise. And the thing is will it ever be possible to find a symbiosis between humans and machines, basically to make content accessible to people throughout the world, but also to still keep benefiting from that? Because of course, clients and LSPs, this probably sounds obvious, but of course they benefit from cutting the costs and having higher productivity. But also, if the translators are provided with the right tools to actually have all the data at the feet, well, maybe not at the feet, but in front of them, to start making decisions on how to do basically business with their clients, they can find themselves basically earning more money than they were before, because basically they would do more in less time, maybe at a slightly lesser cost, but then again, with a higher volume and the ease of work, basically they would still compensate for that, and perhaps getting a little extra than what they would actually do with, I don't know, higher rates but a much smaller volume of clients. I mean, even volume of translations, but also less clients. So I think it is a way that, if used correctly, it can allow translators to actually expand their market a lot more than it was possible many years ago without this possibility. So
I really actually like this image here, because I think this actually represents the what we're going to see in the near future. So integration between human and technology, and actually taking technology as a partner and not as an enemy, to actually obtain more from what you're doing right now. So I really love this image, and yeah, I'm glad you put it in the presentation as well. So I think we do have, but well, okay, we're a little bit late, Luca. Oh. It's your fault.
Oh, sorry.
It's always your fault.
I got ahead of myself.
So I think if you're all okay, we're just gonna take a few more minutes of your time to get through a few questions that came in. Well, actually, a lot of questions came in. So I'm really sorry if we're not going to be able to answer all of the questions right now, but what we're going to do together with Luca is we're going to take all the questions that came in, answer them, and then send them to you via email. But in the meantime, if you're all okay, I would like to just take a few other minutes to go through a couple of questions that came in that are very, very interesting. And actually, considering this last part that you said, Robin, that is actually apologizing because he's been asking so many questions, but Robin, please continue to. It's okay. He's actually saying that I never hear people outside the translation profession saying that machine translation will not take over the human translator. And I think this is very, very interesting. Non-translators think that machine translation is brilliant. We all know the truth. In what way do you think that neural machine translation and tools like yours that Matecat can contribute towards separating the men from the boys, or in other words, the good from the bad? Now, I find Robin's, well, let's say comment, because it's not really a question, but I found his comments really, really good.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, correct me if I'm wrong, Luca, we have to also we'll understand that there are different uses of machine translation. Now, for example, if I have to just understand, let's say, I don't know, a song or a website that is written in German, let's say,
Mm-hmm.
and I have no idea what German even looks like almost, obviously, I use machine translation for that. And it's actually brilliant, as Robin is saying. But if I am let's say, a multinational company, okay,
Mm-hmm.
and I want to translate my website in 20 different languages,
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't think the same, because otherwise I would start receiving, let's say, complaints for users, or maybe not converting enough people on the website. So I think that there is a distinction here between the people that use machine translation, even if they're not translators, for, let's say, personal use, and those who use machine translation for a professional use. And I think there is a big difference between these two. Robin, tell me what you think about it. And if you have any comments, please do let us know. You want to say something about this, Luca?
I actually totally agree. And the fact is, think about something like, I don't know, Facebook or Amazon. I mean, it's immediately obvious when you see a content that is purely machine translated, and well, usually you see comments trading along,
Mm-hmm.
kind of making fun of it, and this is never good from the community point of view, and even for the image that you want to give of your business. So what are they doing about it? I mean, the fact is, yes, they are investing a lot of machine translation, because of course there is a lot of user-generated content that cannot be translated otherwise. But then again, the truth of the matter is that there is always there is always going to be a translator that is going to make decent content for what you see. In which way? There are two ways for doing that that I think they're doing. Now, there is a part of content that actually they send out for post-editing. So
Mm-hmm.
of course there's a huge amount of volume that is used for post-editing
Mm-hmm.
by real translators. But then again, also translators can participate into making machine translation engines better. So what they do, they would kind of be consultants. So instead of, for example, getting paid to actually do raw translations, maybe they would still get the same kind of pay, but to consult on how to make better data for these machine translation engines, and start to produce, to increase the efficiency of the algorithms. So this is a way for translators to reinvent themselves. So maybe you can do the raw work of still doing translation, or in this case, maybe machine translation post-editing,
Mm-hmm.
which is still lighter in terms of effort. I mean, or at least that's what it should be ideally. But also there are cases in which they can reinvent themselves and participate in the actual process of developing technology.
Yeah.
So I think this is very interesting, and this is one of the things that actually Claudia was describing earlier, about being able to reinvent yourself in a new, rediscover basically your profession under a new fashion.
Yep. And I think that we're really out of time. We are almost over 5 minutes, and I'm really sorry that Luca was so long in presenting this topic. No, just kidding. But there are actually a lot of interesting questions. But I would really like to maybe conclude this this webinar with a comment that has been coming through from Vladimir. Now, Vladimir has been participating in this webinar as well, with a lot of comments and a lot of questions. And he's actually saying a very interesting thing. Just to get back to post-editing and productivity that you have. He's saying that previously I would not use MT because the time to post-edit was more or less equal to the time to translate from scratch. Mm-hmm. And we saw that, for example, back in 2010, post-editing effort was almost 50%.
That's correct.
So it was actually almost useless. The situation now is very different, he's saying. Making use of adaptive neural machine translation cuts my turnaround times by at least 20–30%, and this is amazing. Obviously, what he's saying is that it depends on the type of the source material, of course.
Yeah.
Obviously, it all depends on what type of material you're translating, the subject that you're translating. But actually, cutting turnaround times by 20-30%, I think this is the key element that you have to take into consideration when you propose machine translation together with a translation job.
Absolutely.
So I think just this is, well, this webinar had a lot of food for thoughts on machine translation and post-editing, and I hope you enjoyed it.
Well, I think it was kind of obvious that I identified you.
Yes, you just kept talking all the time, Luca. Well, just kidding, obviously. But what we're going to do is we're going to get all the questions, as I was saying, and get back to you with the answers to all the questions. There are a lot of people that are also asking for the recording of this webinar. Let's see if this is possible, and then we will send it to you via email. Thank you all for participating today. If you want to give it a try, and if you want to have a look at what neuro-machine translation looks like, you can go to www.matecat.com and you can start translating right away with neuro-machine translations. If you do have any additional question, please feel free to write us an email at info@matecat.com. And as third point here says, don't go away. Please leave us your feedback so that we can improve, and see you in 2 weeks' time for the next webinar. Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.